We have an update. We have an update on that Miami ICE agent arrested for drunk driving with his two kids in the back seat in the Florida Keys back in August. Some of you might remember police pulled over a 42-year-old man who then failed a field sobriety test, claimed he was an ICE agent, turned belligerent, resisted arrest, and asked one of the black officers if he was Haitian. When told by the cops it didn't matter if the police officer was Haitian, the suspect is seen on video saying, "Yes, it does." This happened back in August. ICE refused to say whether this man was in fact working for ICE. We can now report, yes, he was an ICE agent at the time, and he still is. The Monroe County Sheriff's Office announcing on Monday that they arrested him and charged this ICE agent with drunk driving as well as child endangerment, since his two kids in the back seat were 7 and 9. WPLG News 10 reporting that ICE has not fired the man who is now seeking alcohol treatment. According to reports, the ICE agent reeked of alcohol, had no idea where he was, told cops he thought he was in a city 100 miles away from where he was actually stopped with two kids in his back seat. I'm not going to tell you this guy's name or show you a picture, but I recommend you go online and Google 42-year-old ICE agent arrested for drunk driving in the Florida Keys. The entire encounter captured by police body cams. And if you want to know what our defense chief, Pete Hegseth, looks and sounds like when he's had too much, this is pretty much it. So there are several pictures of the ICE agent being arrested. There's video. I'm not going to show it. This is one of the photos of the ICE agent being pulled over. I replaced his face with Pete Hegseth's because that's who Pete Hegseth is. This guy who was arrested, like Hegseth, this guy, white, male, dripping with racism and, of course, entitlement, with his two small kids in the back seat. So, look, all of us are jerks. And the more power we have over other humans, the more of a jerk we often become. Not all humans are jerks all of the time, but all humans are jerks some of the time. I am a jerk, which is why you should never trust me with too much power. You should trust nobody with too much power. All agents who work for ICE are jerks. Not all of the time, but all ICE agents are jerks. And like everyone else in this country, they cannot be trusted with too much power. Here is the latest on that ICE agent shooting a U.S. deputy marshal and a TikTok streamer community activist early Tuesday morning in Los Angeles. So there's the official story, and then there's what's coming in. Information we're now getting calls into serious question the competency and intelligence of all our nation's ICE agents. Here's the official story. Here's what we've been told so far about that ICE agent in Los Angeles who shot a deputy federal marshal and a TikTok streamer community activist who is also a suspected undocumented immigrant who now is being accused of resisting arrest, and he got shot by this ICE agent. The U.S. Marshal Service saying the deputy U.S. Marshal was shot by that ICE agent accidentally. The deputy U.S. Marshal sustained 9 non-life-threatening injuries and is in stable condition. The Washington Post reports no information as to when he'll be released from the hospital. The Los Angeles Times reporting the incident took place early Tuesday morning during a targeted traffic stop. KABC Eyewitness News in Los Angeles reporting several ICE vehicles attempted what is called a pincer formation, where they squeeze the lane, making it impossible for the driver to ride off without ramming into them. The Department of Homeland Security claiming the driver attempted to flee by ramming his car into an ICE officer. And this is what the Department of Homeland Security said, that he attempted to flee, he rammed his car into an ICE officer, and that ICE agent fired in self-defense. That was the official report from the Department of Homeland Security, that the ICE agent fired at the TikTok streamer in self-defense. The Los Angeles Times reporting the ICE agent's bullet struck this TikTok streamer, who goes by the name Richard L.A. He's gained 150,000 followers by chronicling ICE activity in the city. KABC saying Richard L.A. is a community activist and was recognized recently by Los Angeles City Councilman Curran Price Jr. for his contributions to the neighborhood. So at first, we thought the ICE agent's bullet hit both a TikTok streamer and a suspected undocumented immigrants. But now the story seems to be ICE agents were attempting to arrest Richard L.A., who ICE claims is an undocumented immigrant who happens to have 150,000 TikTok subscribers who watch his ICE videos. Okay? We are now learning that ICE targeted Richard L.A., a community activist with 150,000 TikTok subscribers. He travels around Los Angeles documenting ICE activity. ICE now claiming his real name is Carlitos Ricardo Parias and that he is not an American citizen. He was the target in this arrest. Richard L.A. was taken to the hospital, released later on Tuesday. Acting U.S. Attorney Bill Astley now saying Richard L.A. has been taken into detention. He is going to be charged with assaulting a federal officer. So that seems to be the official story. Wait, hang on for 1 second here. The official story is a Los Angeles community activist who was exercising his right to video ICE agents, was the target of an arrest early Tuesday morning where a shot was fired, hitting that community activist, as well as a deputy U.S. Marshal. Again, the ICE agent's bullet reportedly ricocheted, hitting the deputy U.S. Marshal. That's the official story. That's what most of the news organizations are reporting, but we are now getting information that investigators may have discovered that the ICE agent didn't fire his weapon intentionally, that it accidentally discharged while he banged his gun against the suspect's window, attempting to break it and grab him. Instead, and again, these are preliminary reports, the ICE agent's gun accidentally went off as the ICE agent pounded his gun against the suspect's car window. That's when the gun discharged and a bullet hit TikTok streamer Richard L.A., the target of the arrest, and then the bullet ricocheted, hitting a deputy U.S. Marshal. By the way, all this happening in front of a school and a church in downtown Los Angeles. Again, we're not sure this is exactly what happened, but from what we're hearing, yes, an ICE agent apparently tried to smash open a suspect's car window with a loaded gun, which then went off, hitting the suspect and a deputy U.S. Marshal. Where in the ICE training manual does it say you should use a loaded gun as a hammer when attempting to smash open a window? If this is true, and it may be, That ICE agent is the one who should be deported back to fetal alcohol syndrome-istan. The suspect, again, the target of this arrest, who ended up getting shot, he's a community activist who posts videos on TikTok, videos of ICE activity, ABC7, the Los Angeles Times, NBC, all saying he has no criminal record. Now, he's not a U.S. citizen, apparently. Being in this country without documentation is a civil offense, not a criminal one. So why was he targeted early Tuesday morning by ICE? Why would ICE target a community activist who posts videos of ICE agents on TikTok to his 150,000 subscribers? Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin now calling this a developing story, which means they're going to keep lying to us until we're distracted by some other ICE horror show. We'll be following this. Meanwhile, Illinois police and the FBI continue to investigate, with no charges filed yet, against the ICE agent who shot and killed 38-year-old Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, a Mexican national with no criminal record, who the ICE agents thought was in this country without proper documentation. The ICE agent claims he tried to arrest Gonzalez, who drove off, dragging that ICE agent with him. The agent said that's when he shot and killed Gonzalez because he was fearing for his life. The ICE agent wasn't wearing a body cam because, unlike local police, ICE agents, thanks to Trump, have been told they don't have to wear body cams. But body cam footage from local police who arrived on the scene immediately after, that body cam footage shows the ICE agent with torn pants saying, quote, "I got dragged a little bit, just a left knee injury and some lacerations, nothing major," unquote. A witness telling Chicago's ABC Eyewitness News that ICE vehicles attempted to pin Gonzalez's car, and then Gonzalez put his car in reverse. Then he moved it into forward, and that's when the cop killed him, reportedly with 2 bullets. Surveillance video suggests that the 2 gunshots were probably fired at Gonzalez while he was driving away. So I'm not going to play those videos. The New York Times has extensive analysis. They did this earlier this month, and you can watch all the videos, the surveillance videos, the body cam videos over at the New York Times. They weren't wearing body cams at the time, but there was closed circuit TV that captured a lot of it, and it looks pretty bad. It looks to me, and I think to most people, that these 2 ICE agents really screwed up and killed this guy. They got out of their car, and when Gonzalez tried to leave, we do see one of the agents pulling out a gun immediately. And then Gonzalez goes into reverse, maybe with the other ICE agent's arm reaching through the window, but it didn't look like that ICE agent was being dragged as Gonzalez drove into reverse. I mean, maybe dragged a little, but it wasn't life-threatening, didn't necessitate shots being fired. And then we see on the video Gonzalez putting the car in forward, and he drives off. And if you look at the videos, at least it seems to me and a lot of people, that as he was driving off, that's when he was shot and killed, while he was driving away. The ICE agents immediately, when he went into reverse, went for their guns, not tasers, guns. And when he drove away, they didn't chase him in their cars. Instead, the ICE agent just fired 1, possibly 2 kill shots. No evidence Gonzalez had any weapon on him. He was just driving away. Gonzalez was a Mexican immigrant. Now, here's why he was probably driving away. He was a Mexican immigrant living in our country for 18 years, living in his country for 18 years, working as a cook at a Greek diner on Chicago's North Side. This is his country. He's dead now, but this is his country as well. A single dad with two sons, ages 4 and 6, both of whom are American citizens who he had just dropped off at daycare right before he was killed. The two children have now been sent to Idaho under the custody of child welfare so they could be reunited with their mother, who was separated from their father. You got it? Gonzalez, who was shot to death by ICE agents, was raising these two boys, not the mother. This is who that ICE agent shot and killed, a single father of two American citizens aged 4 and 6. When ICE agents began pinning his car in, he did what I would have done. He put it in reverse because this man had two sons, ages 4 and 6, who needed him to come home that day. Gonzalez did what any law-abiding father would do, knowing that unless he put the car in reverse and got away, he was about to get thrown into a morass of ICE detention facilities where, if lucky, he gets shipped back to Mexico and never sees his two sons again, or goes weeks, months, if not years before seeing them. And the mother is in Idaho. I would have done the same thing. If I were being chased by ICE agents with two small boys in daycare who needed me, I would have tried to get away from those ICE agents, especially since he didn't have a criminal record. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't fire a weapon. He didn't assault an ICE agent. He hadn't committed any felonies. We're told they're rounding up the worst of the worst. No gang membership, no crimes. He wasn't wanted for anything. He was just low-hanging fruit. NBC News, Reuters, and the New York Times all report Gonzalez had no criminal record or convictions beyond minor traffic violations from 6 years ago, a busted taillight and driving without proper insurance. All of that had been resolved at least 6 years ago. No criminal record, which is more than can be said about our president, who's a convicted felon. It's more than we can say about a lot of people who have served in the Trump administration, many of whom with storied histories of arrests for domestic abuse. In fact, the de facto number 2 man at Homeland Security, Corey Lewandowski, several arrests and accusations of abusing women. In a 2-1 ruling, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit said Donald Trump can send troops to Portland, Oregon to protect an ICE detention facility that has been the scene of countless protests where demonstrators wearing inflatable costumes taunt federal police. And occasionally, these protesters go so far as to kick tear gas canisters back at the ICE agents firing them. The 2 justices who vote in favor of sending in the troops are Trump appointees, but they admitted Trump exaggerated threats to the ICE detention center in Portland. The justices said they overturned a lower court ruling that blocked the troops from being deployed to Portland because they believe U.S. law clearly gives the president authority to deploy the National Guard even when it's over the objections of Portland's mayor and the governor of Oregon. As I said, a lower court blocked Trump from not just activating the Oregon National Guard, but the California National Guard, or any other National Guard to march on the streets of Portland. Trump federalized 200 Oregon National Guard soldiers on September 27th, claiming Portland was, quote, war ravaged. The judge in the lower court blocked him from sending those troops into the streets. I love this photo. It's like a really great episode of The Masked Singer. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, who filed the lawsuit to block the president, is now calling the court's ruling a gross, un-American abuse of power. She and the mayor of Portland say local police are doing an excellent job dealing with these protesters who have turned the scene outside that ICE detention facility. They've turned it into a party with dancing, roller skating, music, as well as arts and craft lessons. And of course, there are the inflatables. So this is heading to the Supreme Court. The Ninth Circuit is the step before the Supreme Court, but this ruling came from a three-judge panel. As part of the appeals process, on Wednesday, the three-judge panel's decision now goes before the full bench of the Ninth Circuit Court, meaning all the judges. The Ninth Circuit is often called the Ninth Circus Court because of its liberal bent, headquartered in San Francisco. Among the 12 regional circuit courts, the Ninth has the largest geographic expanse, including, among other states and territories, California, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, and Guam. It also has the largest number of people living in its jurisdiction. There are close to 30 judges on that bench, give or take a few. Democratic nominees slightly outnumber Republican judges. Oral arguments are Wednesday. So our legal system is a Byzantine maze, and it's that way on purpose. I'm not defending how it works, but the idea is things are supposed to move slowly with an almost holistic philosophy at play, a belief that sometimes legal issues resolve themselves if left untouched or neglected. What we're seeing are temporary restraining orders blocking many of Trump's moves. Then appeals courts sometimes overturn those restraining orders, sometimes not. This is a conversation among the lower courts. And what this lumbering, slow motion conversation does is derail Trump, makes it harder and harder for him. It gives everyone time for reflection, and the idea being that if and when any of these rulings and questions from the lower courts make it to the Supreme Court, by the time it makes it to the Supreme Court, both sides will be prepared to make their constitutional argument. That's how our system doesn't work, but that is our system. On a personal note to all you inflatables working outside the detention facilities, I'm embarrassed to say you make me cry. Somewhere in heaven, Abby Hoffman is looking down and smiling. Your courage is humbling. Your lessons are for the ages. There can be no progress without joy. And that's what you're giving all of us. 20 years from now, your children will ask, what did you do to stop the fascists? And you can whip out a picture of you and one of your inflatables and say, I did this. I wouldn't presume to speak for Dr. King, Mandela, or Gandhi, but I have to believe this is what nonviolent resistance against idiots should look like. These inflatables remind every ICE agent that they too are wearing ridiculous costumes. I've been saying this for 5 years, and I've been right for 5 years. Abolish ICE. We don't need ICE. Abolish ICE. And if you work for ICE, you're the problem. You're a bad person. You should be ashamed of yourself. New momentum for Democrats coming off Saturday's No Kings rally, where more than 7 million peaceful Americans took to the streets in more than 2,500 locations nationwide, protesting Trump's unrelenting lurch towards white Christian nationalist authoritarianism. That's exactly what this is. So someone should tell Marco Rubio he's Hispanic. This is white Christian nationalist authoritarianism, all in the service of the oligarchs who may or may not themselves be white Christian nationalist authoritarians. They might only be authoritarians, but if white Christian nationalism is the glue keeping the authoritarianism alive, they're fine with it. A new Gallup poll showing a 7-point advantage for Democrats heading into next year's midterms. 48% of voters now say they identify as Democrat, while only 41% Republican. This is some of the best polling for Democrats in years. No Kings, the protests, obviously fantastic, but will it translate into winning back the House or Senate or both? On Thursday, North Carolina Senate approved a new congressional map that carves out a reliably red seat, a new reliably red seat. Right now, North Carolina, which is almost a swing state, almost, Obama carried it in 2008. Right now, North Carolina sends 10 Republicans to the House of Representatives and 4 Democrats. Should the new map go through, it would be 11 Republicans and 3 Democrats. North Carolina's newly elected Democratic Governor Josh Stein can't veto the new map because enshrined into the state's constitution is granting the legislative branch sole authority to draw maps, with the governor having no veto power. No veto power when it comes to the maps. No veto power when it comes to redistricting. It's too bad because while the Republicans have a veto-proof majority in the Senate, they can override the veto with 3/5 of the vote in the Senate. Republicans in the State House are 2 votes shy of a veto-proof majority. So if the governor had the power to veto this map, they couldn't override it. Again, this new map will be challenged in the courts, but Republicans have a 5-2 majority in the North Carolina Supreme Court. And if we take it to the Supreme Court, there's a 6-3 Republican majority. I doubt it will make it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has ruled that it's in rare cases, only in rare cases, it's up to state Supreme Courts to decide the final disposition of legislative maps. The New York Times reporting Trump asked his Department of Justice to reimburse his $230 million in legal expenses racked up over the past 4 years while he was indicted for attempting to overturn the 2020 presidential election and mishandling classified documents. Those legal fees, by the way, were paid by people, morons, who donated to his super PACs. It never came out of his own pocket, and a case could be made this was wire fraud. I've been over it, but ultimately, the decision to reimburse Trump will be made by the 2 top lawyers in the Justice Department, Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche. Blanche served as Trump's criminal defense attorney last year. Pam Bondi served as one of Trump's lawyers during his first Senate impeachment trial. According to the New York Times, Trump also wants to get reimbursed for legal fees incurred after the FBI launched an investigation into Russiagate, which continued until the Mueller report was issued in 2019. It went from 2016 to 2019. So Trump filed 2 claims with the Justice Department to get reimbursed. He did one in 2023. He filed another in 2024, asking for all his legal fees to be reimbursed. Devlin Barrett and Tyler Pager write in the New York Times that these 2 claims, serve as a precursor to an eventual civil suit where Trump would presumably take the Justice Department to court for malicious prosecution if Bondi and Blanche decide not to pay his legal fees. What are the chances that Trump's former defense lawyers, who now run the Justice Department, are going to say, no, we're not reimbursing your legal fees? Asked Tuesday about his chances of getting reimbursed, Trump said, quote, I'm the one that ultimately makes this decision. That decision would have to go across my desk. And I got to say, it's strange to make a decision where I pay myself. Donald, it's strange for you to pay anyone. Anyone. For the record, none of his indictments or criminal investigations meet the threshold for malicious prosecution. The Mueller report concluded that Russia did in fact interfere in the 2016 presidential election on behalf of Donald Trump, and that meetings did in fact take place between Trump and Russian operatives. Mueller wrote that he could not recommend prosecuting Trump because Trump was president at the time, and it was official Justice Department policy not to prosecute sitting presidents. He didn't clear Trump. In the second half of the Mueller report, Mueller presents a blueprint for prosecuting Trump for obstruction of justice, blocking the investigation into Russiagate. For example, firing the FBI Director James Comey after he refused to stop looking into Russiagate. Special counsel Jack Smith indicted Trump in two separate courts. He indicted Trump in D.C. for Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The Supreme Court in July of last year ruled Trump might have some immunity for some of the actions he took leading up to the January 6th insurrection. The Supreme Court sent this case back down to a lower court for Jack Smith, the special counsel, and the judge, Tanya Chutkan, to parse out which crimes Trump could be charged with that don't fall under official role as president. Smith, late last year, came back with new superseding indictments charging Trump with attempting to overturn the 2020 election while performing unofficial roles as president. This was going to be reviewed by the Supreme Court, but as we all know, the Supreme Court dragged its feet. So by the time these superseding indictments came out, it was too late for the Supreme Court to review the indictments because the presidential election was like weeks away and Trump won. So had Trump lost, the Supreme Court would have looked at those superseding indictments, but Trump won. And Jack Smith, the special counsel, knowing Trump was just about to fire him, Jack Smith immediately dissolved the special counsel's office and dismissed the indictments. Now, theoretically, after Trump theoretically leaves office and a Democrat becomes president, those indictments could theoretically be jump-started. There are some statute of limitations, but those statutes of limitations could be waived should the courts decide there had been extenuating circumstances that justify extending the time limit on the statutes of limitations. The only reason Donald Trump was not tried for January 6th is because under our Constitution, he controls the Justice Department right now. As for the indictment on mishandling classified documents, a case which even Trump's own Attorney General Bill Barr called a slam dunk for special counsel Jack Smith, that case was dismissed by the judge, a Trump appointee. But Smith, the special counsel, was appealing her decision before the Supreme Court when Trump was reelected and the special counsel's office was dissolved. The judge in that classified documents case threw it out because she decided the job of special counsel was against the law. She decided it violated the Appointments Clause of the Constitution. This was an issue first raised by Clarence Thomas in his concurring opinion back in July of 2024 when the court ruled presidents have some immunity. Thomas wrote, well, you know, a special counsel is a U.S. attorney, and U.S. attorneys have to be nominated by a president and then confirmed by the Senate. That didn't happen with Jack Smith, our special counsel, so this job is unconstitutional. That's what Clarence Thomas wrote. Maybe he may be right. It's an interesting, he may be right. I'd have to reread the Appointments Clause of the Constitution. First, I'd have to read the Appointments Clause of the Constitution in order to reread it. I've never read it. Who am I kidding? So based on Thomas suggesting that special counsel Jack Smith's job was against the law because he wasn't approved by the Senate, this judge in the classified documents case threw the entire case out, but she never ruled that Trump didn't flagrantly violate the Espionage Act by mishandling classified documents, refusing to turn them over, ordering employees at Mar-a-Lago to hide classified documents from the FBI. She only ruled that special counsel Jack Smith lacked the jurisdiction. It was dismissed on procedural grounds. He wasn't exonerated. By the way, the Republican-controlled Senate Judiciary Committee is investigating special counsel Jack Smith for so-called malicious prosecution of Donald Trump. Jack Smith's lawyers on Tuesday disappointed the Senate Judiciary Committee when they told him he never asked the FBI to tap Donald Trump's phones. Donald Trump's phones were never tapped. That was very disturbing information for Chuck Grassley, the Republican chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I think Chuck Grassley died 5 years ago. Amazing that he can still chair that committee. So, Trump may not, where am I? What happened? Hang on. Trump may not, I'm pretending I know where I am. I lost my notes. Hang on. My notes, come on. This is so humiliating. The secret is not to panic, but I do need a new pair of underwear right now. Come on. Sorry. Wow. Should I wrap it up? No. Okay. Let me go someplace else. Okay. Trump may not have been tried, but he never cleared his name in court when it comes to January 6th and mishandling classified documents. He spent roughly $250 million on lawyers to delay justice until he got reelected. And that RICO case in Georgia, remember that? Where he had to pose for this mugshot? That trial, theoretically, still going on. Because Trump had hundreds of millions of dollars at his disposal for lawyers, and because Georgia is a red state, he was able eventually to convince the Georgia Supreme Court that the prosecutor who brought the RICO trial, Fani Willis, as well as her entire office, should be disqualified from this trial because she took some vacations with the lead lawyer in the case. They may have been romantically involved. And somehow the Georgia Supreme Court agreed with Trump's attorneys that Fani Willis was compromised and biased because she took a vacation, maybe 2 vacations, with the lead lawyer in the case. And that disqualifies her entire office. And now that RICO trial has to be transferred to another prosecutor in Georgia. Presumably, it'll be a red prosecutor, where no doubt that prosecutor, a Republican, will kill the RICO trial. No jury, no judge has ever exonerated Donald Trump. He spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to pay lawyers to keep him from ever going to trial, except, of course, in Manhattan, where he was found guilty last year and remains a convicted felon. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. Again, never been tried for January 6th, never tried for mishandling classified documents. He lost the Manhattan criminal trial, and since he left office in 2021, he has lost every single civil trial. He lost the E. Jean Carroll trial twice. He's got to pay her $85 million. He's appealing. And he lost that civil fraud trial where a judge found Trump lied to bankers and lenders, and that judge fined Trump $500 million. A state appeals court ruled the fine was excessive, but they agreed that there was fraud. New York State Attorney General Letitia James is appealing the ruling that throws out the $500 million fine. And Trump is appealing the fraud ruling. So look, had Trump lost last year, he'd already have been convicted for January 6th. I believe that. Jack Smith, the special counsel, had him dead to rights, even with the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. It is not the official role of a president to interfere with elections. So I'm going to say something now that I don't agree with, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm just going to pose this, leave a comment. You're all going to get upset. I'm going to say something that it's alternative history. What if? Do you think, looking back, that if Biden pardoned Trump, maybe Trump would have gone away? I'm just wondering. Look, nobody hates Trump more than I do, with the possible exception of Melania. I want him behind bars. But looking back at how everything turned out, looking back at how every time Trump got indicted, he also got a bump in the polls and more donations. Do you think it might have been the wrong time for our Justice Department to suddenly pretend no one in this country is above the law? Looking back, I'm asking, had Trump been pardoned, and again, I'm asking, there's a part of me that wonders, had he been pardoned, would he have come across less as a martyr of our very corrupt criminal justice system? Would he, had he been pardoned, come across less sympathetic to voters? A pardon would also, I think, make him appear weak. Now, granted, he's a sociopath incapable of shame, remorse, or even fear. I have no doubt he would have turned the pardon to his advantage. But maybe a pardon would have dialed back the heat, giving Republicans space to find a new a-hole to run for president. I don't know. It would have turned Biden, no doubt, into a one-term president, the way Ford pardoning Nixon turned him into a one-term president. A lot of people think that's why Ford lost to Jimmy Carter. Maybe it was the pardon, or maybe it's because during the debate, Ford didn't know where Eastern Europe was. Not making that up. So, here's what I'm positive about. There's a little part of me that thinks, okay, Biden should have, maybe if he had pardoned Trump, it would have weakened Trump. I do know Merrick Garland should have either indicted Trump at the end of 2021 for January 6th, and if you're not going to do that, then you pardon him. It should not have taken 2.5 years to put together an indictment. You do it while the insurrection was fresh in everybody's mind and before Trump is a presidential candidate again. Trump was indicted for January 6th, which happened in 2021. He was indicted for that in August of 2023, more than 2.5 years after January 6th. And he was already a presidential candidate for almost a year by then. He announced he was running again right after the 2022 midterms. Trump was indicted on October 1st, 2023. The first Iowa Republican debate was 22 days later. So, of course, people were going to see this as a political prosecution. He needed to be indicted in 2021 for January 6th, or maybe he should have been pardoned. I'm probably not certain about the pardon. Leave a comment. But I do know he should have been indicted in 2021. Instead, Garland went bottom up instead of top down. Meanwhile, a January 6th insurrectionist pardoned by Trump was arrested on Sunday, charged with threatening to kill Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Christopher Moynihan was arrested Sunday and then pled not guilty on Monday. Moynihan, according to prosecutors, texted a friend calling Hakeem Jeffries a terrorist who he cannot allow to live. Moynihan also allegedly messaged his intentions to eliminate and kill the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. Moynihan was sentenced originally to 21 months in prison for his role on January 6th. As you can see from these pictures, he made it all the way into the Senate chamber that day. Should not have been pardoned. Capitol Police telling CBS News the number of actionable threats against members of Congress this year is already approaching 15,000. That's the highest on record. Asked to comment about the Moynihan character arrested for threatening the life of Hakeem Jeffries, Speaker Mike Johnson told reporters, quote, "I don't know any of the details to all this. I will tell you the violence on the left is far more prevalent than the violence on the right. The rhetoric that you saw on Saturday plays into this," unquote. Well, you heard my show Monday. You read about Saturday's No Kings protests. No kings, no violence, no cops injured. 13 arrested in Denver, 14 arrested in Los Angeles for failure to go home. No arrests in Austin, New York, Chicago, San Diego, or DC. It was totally peaceful. And that drives Republicans crazy. And which, you know, they already are, drives them crazier. There was no violence. And there was, despite what Mike Johnson wants you to believe, no violent rhetoric. These were peaceful protests because they were protests for peace. The protests were saying, don't send the National Guard into our streets and don't attack Venezuela. Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, accusing Donald Trump of murder after American airstrikes supposedly targeting Venezuelan drug dealers, killed a 52-year-old fisherman from Colombia, not Venezuela, from Colombia. On September 15th, Alejandro Carranza from Santa Marta, Colombia, was in his wooden fishing boat, La Esperanza, when engine failure prompted him to put out a distress signal. Instead of coming to his rescue, our Pentagon, the people who work for you and me and are paid with our tax dollars, they fired a missile paid for with your tax dollars. They fired that missile at the wooden boat, killing everyone on board, or at least the Colombian fishermen. Trump, Hegseth, claimed they hit a submersible piloted by terrorists bringing fentanyl into Miami. Colombia's president first complained privately through diplomatic channels. Completely ignored, he called the killing an act of tyranny and demanded a criminal probe by both the United States and international law enforcement. Trump responded by telling reporters that Colombia's president was, quote, low-rated and a very unpopular leader with a fresh mouth toward America, unquote. A fresh mouth toward America. Well, he's a man, so he didn't call him nasty. On Sunday, Trump levied new tariffs on Colombian coffee. And now it gets personal because the price of coffee, thanks to climate catastrophe, is already going up. And now tariffs. Trump said he would cut nearly $500 million that America gives Colombia. We give Colombia $500 million to help curb drug trafficking. So he's cutting that off. And then on Monday, Colombia recalled its ambassador to the United States. Also on Monday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio called Trump's decision to cut Colombia's foreign aid, he called it, quote, tough love. Tough love. Someone should do a welfare check on Rubio's children, if that's what tough love is in his mind. Republican Congressman Corey Mills, ordered by a Florida judge to stay away from his mistress, Miss United States 2023, and currently she's an employee of the Florida GOP. The two dated while Corey Mills was married, and according to the complaint, after they broke up, he threatened to send nude pictures and video of her to any man who tries to date her. Mills ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from his former mistress, who he had sex with while married to the mother of his two children. The judge said Mills, could no longer phone or text the woman he slept with while married to the mother of his two sons. Did I mention that Corey Mills, the Republican, cheated on his wife? Columbia County Circuit Judge Fred Koberlein also called the congressman's testimony during the hearings untruthful. In other words, he lied to the judge. Hard to believe. In February of this year, Washington, D.C. police were called to Congressman Corey Mills's penthouse apartment after a 27-year-old woman called 911 saying she was being assaulted by him. Police noticed bruises on this woman but failed to arrest the congressman that night. D.C. police then conducted an internal review to determine why the responding officers didn't arrest Congressman Mills, since protocol demands police responding to a domestic assault call and then seeing bruises, well, they are required to take the man in for at least questioning. Weeks later, Washington, D.C. police presented an arrest warrant for Corey Mills. They presented it to the U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C., temporarily run at the time by Trump's nominee, Ed Martin, who refused to sign the arrest warrant and killed the arrest. Trump, you might recall, withdrew Ed Martin's nomination to serve as the permanent U.S. Attorney for D.C. It was withdrawn for many reasons, including Ed Martin's ties to January 6 defendants. Ed Martin instead now works inside the Justice Department's pardon office. I think Diddy is about to be pardoned. Corey Mills by the way, was evicted this year from that D.C. penthouse apartment after refusing to pay the $100,000 he owed in back rent. In May of this year, the congressman announced he was divorcing the mother of his two sons. Before elected to Congress, Corey Mills started and still runs a weapons company, and he proudly boasts that he manufactures the tear gas used on Black Lives Matter protesters, pro-Palestine protesters, and I'm sure he brags that his tear gas is used on anti-ICE protesters. Corey Mills, Republican congressman from Florida, is currently the subject of an investigation by our House Ethics Committee. They're looking into his conflicts of interest as a U.S. congressman who also owns a defense firm doing business with the government. By the way, when he first came into office 3 years ago, he's now serving his second term, as a way of saying hello, he put inert grenades on every Republican congressman's desk. That was his way. That was like his welcome gift, an inert grenade. There are a lot of sick people in our country, and most of them Republicans. For example, Nick Fuentes is a self-described Nazi who, over the years, has been deplatformed and then replatformed by Twitter, Spotify. Spotify replatformed Fuentes earlier this month, and then he was quickly the number one podcast on Spotify. And then, within days, they immediately deplatformed him after people heard what this self-proclaimed Nazi was saying. Fuentes was very active in the 2020 Stop the Steal movement. He's been a huge supporter of Trump, and he dined with the president at Mar-a-Lago. Although, over the years, Fuentes has become increasingly critical of Trump because of Trump's support for Israel and his refusal to release the Epstein files. Fuentes this week pointed out the obvious, that Donald Trump is a mental defective. Fuentes told his audience, quote, "Something is not right with Donald Trump. The way that he's always glazing himself and repeats himself, he's not right in the head," unquote. You know, folks, when a Nazi thinks you're psychotic, well, maybe you're not a psychotic. I mean, if a Nazi thinks you're psychotic, maybe you're not. Oh, who am I kidding? Trump's a psychotic. Not all Trump supporters are neo-Nazis, but all neo-Nazis are Trump supporters. Senate confirmation hearings were scheduled Wednesday for a 30-year-old Trump pick named Paul Ingrassia, whose nomination was pulled late Tuesday after a series of texts from last year surfaced where Paul Ingrassia admits to having, quote, a Nazi streak. Oh, and he's a recent graduate of Cornell Law School. Politico getting its hands on Ingrassia's messages where he called for the elimination of Martin Luther King's birthday, along with slurs against blacks, Jews, and Asians. Some of the texts are simply too offensive for me to repeat. The more benign messages that I will repeat call for eliminating Kwanzaa, claiming black people's natural state is criminal. He echoed Trump's labeling of the entire continent of Africa as a S-hole, but he said the S word, I won't. On Vivek Ramaswamy, Ingrassia wrote, never trust a Chinaman or an Indian. Now, these are the text messages I'm willing to repeat. Suffice to say, there are countless others that are far too inappropriate. Politico in India Today asked for a comment from Vivek Ramaswamy, who ran for the Republican nomination last year. They wanted to know, do you support Ingrassia's nomination? And Vivek declined to comment. The NAACP called on South Carolina's black Republican Senator Tim Scott and Florida's black Republican Congressman Tim Scott, who's running for governor, NAACP called on these two black Republicans to urge the White House to withdraw Ingracia's nomination. They, too, like Vivek Ramaswamy, remained silent. But Republicans Rick Scott of Florida, white, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, white, and James Lankford of Oklahoma, white, all said before the nomination was pulled that they would vote against Ingracia. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican, said Monday he doubted Ingracia's nomination would even make it out of committee. Well, it didn't even make it into committee. Trump nominated Paul Ingracia to head the U.S. Office of Special Counsel. The U.S. Office of Special Counsel was established to protect federal whistleblowers. Ingracia may be a lawyer fresh out of Cornell Law School, but more importantly, he is a Trump loyalist. That's why he was nominated, because the last thing Trump and his cronies who are pillaging the federal government want is protection for whistleblowers. It was a whistleblower, Alex Vindman, who went to the U.S. Office of Special Counsel in 2019 to report Trump's perfect call to Ukraine's President Zelensky, where Trump held up arms shipments in exchange for dirt on the Bidens. That led to his first impeachment. So Trump learned his lesson. Make sure a loyalist has been installed. And this is precisely how democratic republics morph into fascism. Fascists appoint loyalists, defective men with secrets to protect their dear leader from whistleblowers. I'm calling Ingracia a mental defective because anybody who writes those things there's something seriously wrong with a 30-year-old man who went to law school, an Ivy League law school, and comes out of it saying, I have a Nazi streak. Ingracia's mother was reportedly storming through the halls of Congress trying to save her son's nomination. He's 30 years old. She reportedly showed up outside Congressman Jamie Raskin's office, pounding on the door, demanding to speak to Congressman Raskin after Raskin said he was troubled by Ingracia's nomination. Jamie Raskin is a member of the House of Representatives. He doesn't vote on confirmations. Senators confirm presidential nominees. Ingracia, who's 30, his mother, Donna, also visited House Democrat Robert Garcia's office. Again, Congressman, House members don't vote on White House appointments. Robert Garcia is the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee. Mommy, Robert Garcia, 30-year-old Robert Garcia's mother, reportedly demanded a meeting with Congressman Garcia because, like Congressman Raskin, he too had made disparaging comments about her 30-year-old son. Donna Ingracia, the mother, told Notice, N-O-T-U-S, it stands for News of the United States. That is a website everybody should be visiting every day. Notice, N-O-T-U-S. Donna Ingracia, the mother of 30-year-old Paul Ingracia, whose nomination was pulled on Tuesday, she said of her son, her baby boy, quote, Paul has a lot of congressional and senatorial support. He has tremendous support from Jewish leaders and the Catholic community. Paul is articulate, intelligent, and wise beyond his years. He has strong family support and leads a life of faith, integrity, and virtue. And he has a Nazi streak. So look, I'm no psychiatrist. All I know is if I were 30 years old and had a mother like Donna Ingracia, I'd have a Nazi streak as well. I think that would, if my mother stormed the Capitol trying to get me confirmed, I'd be a Nazi too. A 30-year-old man's mother storming the Capitol to lobby for his nomination. You've heard of helicopter parents? This is a Black Hawk helicopter parent. So if you look at the people Hitler surrounded himself with, Hitler surrounded himself had, shall we say, a Nazi streak. I don't think I'm being inflammatory saying that. I would say Paul Ingrassia, who says he has a Nazi streak, he's the type. I think he's weak. If you're 30 and your mother has to storm the Capitol to help you get confirmed, and you allow it, you don't call up and say, "Mommy, what are you doing, Mommy?" I think you're weak. That's my opinion. I think you're weak. And I think he has secrets. I don't know what those secrets are. I have an idea what those secrets probably are. And I'm sure those secrets make him very desirable to someone like Trump or Hitler, because people like Trump and Hitler gravitate to well-educated, sharp men who have some kind of damage. And it's that damage. It's some secret they have that makes them very easy to control. One of the ways you seize power and loot the Treasury is appoint someone you can control as head of the Office of Legal Counsel. Federal employees who witness Trump and his buddies engaging in graft, breaking laws, wasting tax dollars, or just being downright incompetent, if you're a federal employee and you witness all of that, and how can you not, you are legally obligated to blow the whistle. See something? Say something. And because of the Office of Legal Counsel, which Paul Ingrassia was nominated to head, because of the Office of Legal Counsel, they can legally do this confidentially. In 2019, Trump and the Republicans demanded to know who the whistleblower was that reported Trump's perfect phone call. Now, let me ask you a question. If you were a federal employee, would you become a whistleblower if Paul Ingrassia was the guy assigned to protect you? In December 2020, while attending law school, Ingrassia urged Donald Trump to declare martial law to prevent Joe Biden from ever taking office. Paul Ingrassia, while attending Cornell Law School, said Trump should seize the ballot boxes, and he called for red states to secede if that didn't work. All this while attending Cornell Law School. How could Trump not appoint him? Ingrassia currently works for the Department of Homeland Security, where he is currently the subject of a sexual harassment accusation. Now, this was filed on behalf of a female subordinate who complained to a friend, but she told HR she didn't want to make trouble. So her friend did and filed an official complaint accusing Ingrassia of forcing this female Department of Homeland Security employee who worked under Ingrassia to share a room at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, Florida, during a recent immigration enforcement conference hosted by our Department of Homeland Security under Kristi Noem. Yes, federal employees working for the Department of Homeland Security under Kristi Noem get to stay at the Ritz-Carlton. The Department of Homeland Security putting government employees up at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, Florida. By the way, Kristi Noem is requesting 2 private jets for herself. That's for another show. But this is your Department of Government Efficiency hard at work. So Ingrassia, I'm bringing this up for a reason. He's being investigated right now for creating a situation where a woman who worked under him had to share the suite at the Ritz-Carlton with him. Okay, I'll get back to that in a second. I just want to talk about Ingrassia's Nazi streak and the stuff he said about blacks, the Chinese, and Indians. I'm not clutching my pearls, okay? A lot of what he said, by the way, was far worse, and you can Google it. I'm not repeating any of it because I have enough problems keeping the show on all the platforms it's sent out to. And one of the promises I made to myself is I will never get shut down because of my language. I've been doing this show a long time, and I've always said you're going to have to attack my ideas, not my words. That's why I never curse. I don't want to give anyone an excuse to quiet me based on my language. Which brings me to what they now call casual racism among younger Republicans whose message groups were recently exposed by Politico, containing hundreds and hundreds of comments defending the Holocaust, Hitler, and slavery. There are reports now of a GOP congressman from Ohio whose staffer had on his desk an American flag containing a subliminal Nazi sign. The staffer claimed it was put there by vandals. Capitol Police are investigating. On Monday, 26-year-old Vermont State Senator Samuel Douglas, who chaired the Vermont Young Republicans, resigned after racist comments he made in those Young Republican message rooms were revealed. He called Jews dishonest, mocked the bathing habits of Indian women. He joined along as others praised Hitler. You know the drill. So this is an example of what they call casual bigotry, casual racism among young Republicans. It's not casual. It's hardcore. Our Vice President, J.D. Vance, is dismissing all the racist messaging by young Republicans as, quote, boys being boys. He maintains kids say and do stupid things. Well, Paul Ingrassia, Trump's nominee, is 30. That Vermont state senator who just resigned, 26. The average age of those young Republicans caught messaging pro-Nazi talking points, 27. By the way, I love dirty jokes. I love offensive jokes. I love jokes you're not allowed to laugh at. I love South Park, and I especially love Family Guy. I am addicted to Family Guy. Family Guy doesn't even attempt to make these horrible jokes. They don't even try to claim it's part of a larger point under the cover of, we're drawing attention to insensitivity and bigotry. They're just being insensitive and bigoted. That's what makes it so funny. Family Guy just goes for it and says making fun of all the people and subjects you're not allowed to mock is funny. Funny because we're not allowed. So we laugh when we're shocked. As I've said to my children, there's a time and a place for these jokes, like the writing room for Family Guy, a Comedy Central roast, or the Republican Party. So everything is context. These jokes are funny because they're evil. Evil is funny. There's nothing funnier than evil. You shouldn't tweet these jokes or put them in a text message because that shows poor judgment. So there are a lot of adults in need of parenting. So let me help you out here. A good rule is if someone has to look both ways before telling you a joke, if they look both ways to see who's listening, if they have to look both ways before telling you a joke, don't put it on Twitter. Don't put it in a text. Don't commit it to writing. Okay? More importantly, the stuff we're seeing in these group chats among young Republicans or Paul and Gracia, these are not just jokes. It's vile bigotry on a platform for young Republicans who are supposed to be sharing their ideas. But the Republican Party is all out of ideas. Now it's just a party of white grievance with no policy solutions other than punishing people who aren't straight white Christian men. Older Republicans learned a long time ago to cloak their racism, bigotry, misogyny, and anti-Semitism. They speak in what are called dog whistles. Younger Republicans are postmodern. They're stripping away the artifice, and it's not just a celebration of white Christian nationalism. They are openly celebrating fascism, first to shock, to get a rise, but also to test the waters, to see who's interested in fascism. And if confronted, they claim, "I'm only joking." You can make jokes and also mean what you're saying. If you say, "I'm only joking," that doesn't cut it, because you can make jokes and at the same time mean what you're saying. For example, Trump keeps joking right now about a third term. Senator Lindsey Graham keeps going on Fox News and shouting, "Trump 2028. When confronted, Lindsey said, "It's a joke. I'm just messing with the Democrats, having some fun." They say that until it's a joke, but it's also true. The funniest jokes have some kind of truth behind them. The truth behind these jokes that these young Republicans keep telling, the truth about those jokes is the people telling them are racists, bigots, misogynists, and they're homophobic. And the embrace of Hitler we're seeing among these young Republicans, it's not just the ovens they're joking about. In the end, their embrace of Hitler is a genuine adoration of fascism. These are white supremacists, and in order to feel supreme, they must believe down to their very core that Americans are too stupid to be trusted with the vote. That's why Republicans, especially the ones who are lurching towards fascism, suppress the vote. It's why they redraw maps and make it harder for poor people, people of color, and marginalized communities to vote. Republicans don't believe everyone should vote because they don't believe in democracy. Thanksgiving is next month. Ask your crazy uncle if he believes everyone should be allowed to vote. Ask him. There is a growing chorus among young Republicans, especially men, especially working in Silicon Valley. There's a growing chorus of these men who are rediscovering a belief system once brought forth by Elon Musk's Canadian grandfather, who wasn't allowed inside America during World War II because of his Nazi sympathies. This is a belief in a technocracy, a belief that democracy doesn't work and nations should be run by geniuses, unelected experts, because only they are smart enough to navigate complicated problems. Musk's grandfather, who believed only intelligent people should chart a nation's course, died after crashing the plane he was piloting into some low-hanging telephone wires. Incidentally, I should mention that. By the way, these charges against Paul and Gracia, the ones that killed his nomination, are nothing compared to the charges that were against Pete Hegseth before he was confirmed as our nation's defense chief. As bad as Gracia's words are, and maybe he kind of sexually harassed that female coworker by maybe tricking her into sharing his suite at the Ritz-Carlton, it's nothing compared to Pete Hegseth, who, you might remember, was accused of rape. You had to pay the woman 50 grand to make it go away. Paul Ingrassia, amateur compared to Pete Hegseth. In fact, the reason Trump pulled Ingrassia's nomination Tuesday is he wasn't enough of a monster. There's no history of alcoholism like with Hegseth, no financial mismanagement like Hegseth, no adultery, no spousal abuse like our defense chief, Pete Hegseth. Ingrassia was nothing compared to Pete Hegseth, seen here in one of his neo-Nazi tattoos. Here is Pete Hegseth with another Nazi tattoo. It says Deus Vult on his bicep. As I explained on the last show, and I got complaints, so I'm going to go over this again. Yes, Deus Vult in Latin means God's will. What's wrong with Deus Vult? What's wrong with saying God's will? It's not an innocent slogan. And remember, Hegseth is a graduate of Princeton. He knows what Deus Vult means. It was chanted by the Crusaders while waging war on Islam during the Crusades. Deus Vult now is the slogan for neo-Nazis in Europe who want to rid the entire continent of Muslims. Deus Vult. It's God's will. You have in Germany right now a party that came in second in this year's parliamentary elections. This party, Alternative for Germany, calls for the repatriation of all Muslims, whether they're German citizens or non-German citizens. As long as they're Muslims, they got to go. They have to be sent back to their country of origin. The Alternative for Germany party has the support not just from Hegseth, but our Vice President J.D. Vance. They openly call for the forced removal of Muslims from Germany. That's what Deus Vult means. Yes, its roots are in the Crusades, and that alone makes it problematic. But now it's become the symbol for a new crusade. In his book, aptly named American Crusade, by the way, during, right after 9/11 and when we went to war illegally against Iraq and Afghanistan, Republicans were told, don't use the word crusade. Don't use the word crusade. It's offensive to Muslims, and we're killing Muslims. Hegseth said, F this politically correct stuff, and he named his book American Crusade. In that book, Hegseth calls America a Christian nation. He says Islam is a religion of war that's incompatible with the West, incompatible with Western forms of government. Pete Hegseth is incompatible with Western forms of government. Unlike Paul Ingrassia, who was accused of sexual harassment, Pete Hegseth was accused of rape and paid the woman in a sealed settlement. Never forget, Pete Hegseth was hired to work over at Fox by Roger Ailes, who ran Fox News, turning Fox News offices into his own rape factory. Female workers over at Fox News, when Roger Ailes was there, they were lucky if all he did was inappropriately touch them. It should come as no surprise, Pete Hegseth has also been accused of beating his second wife. That accusation comes from Hegseth's former sister-in-law, who signed a sworn affidavit during Hegseth's divorce proceedings. She said he was physically and emotionally abusive. Rolling Stone magazine in January of this year revealed the contents of Hegseth's former sister-in-law's affidavit, in which she said she witnessed Pete Hegseth being violent with her sister, who was his then wife. She said he was emotionally abusive in front of their children, and she said Hegseth is a falling down alcoholic. In the affidavit, the sister-in-law said Hegseth's physical abuse towards his wife got so bad that his wife gave her sister a safe word to let her know when she needed help, and she would often phone her sister while hiding from Hegseth in their closet. Senator Thom Tillis from North Carolina, Republican, promised that sister-in-law in January she would testify before the Senate confirmation hearings, but he chickened out. Republican Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski accused Tillis of stringing her along, making promises that he knew he wasn't going to keep. Tillis promised the sister-in-law her affidavits would be entered into the record. He chickened out. Not only did he not enter her affidavits into the record, he voted for Pete Hegseth. That's Thom Tillis, Republican. And he's one of the good Republicans who's leaving, not running for re-election. Can't take it anymore. A lot of death threats. But you know what? We really didn't need Pete Hegseth's sister-in-law's testimony to know that he's abusive towards women. Why take her word for it? Let's take the word of Pete Hegseth's very own mother, Penelope Hegseth, who sent her son an email on April 30th, 2018, accusing her son, Pete Hegseth, of being an abuser of women. This is from the New York Times. You can Google it. This is what our defense chief, Pete Hegseth's mother, wrote to her son on April 30th, 2018, 1 year after Hegseth was accused of rape. This was in the hands of the Senate before they voted on Pete Hegseth. This was in the New York Times, okay? This is Pete Hegseth's mother writing to him on April 30th, 2018. As a woman and your mother, I feel I must speak out. You are an abuser of women. That is the ugly truth. And I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, and uses women for his own power and ego. You are that man and have been for years. And as your mother, it pains me and embarrasses me to say that, but it is the sad, sad truth. That is Pete Hegseth's mother, Penelope, an email she wrote to her son on April 30th, 2018. She didn't deny she wrote it. She apologized for writing it. Despite all this information in the public record, Hegseth's nomination cleared the Senate after J.D. Vance broke the tie vote. All it took was Thom Tillis to say no. He didn't even have to release the affidavits. He just could have voted no. And Hegseth wouldn't be our defense chief right now. So Paul Ingrassia, the only reason your nomination got pulled and Hegseth's didn't, I think, is because of your mother. You needed a mother like Pete Hegseth had. You needed a mother who knew how to raise a monster. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you so much for listening to me. If you enjoyed any of this, please hit the like button. Please share it. That's the best way to help. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room who keep the conversation civil. I read all your comments. You know that if you're a longtime listener. So leave a comment. If you think I got anything wrong, I will issue an apology. Please share these episodes. Get the word out. And I think that subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my newsletter. Thank you so much.